Hey everyone, my name is Rooster and welcome back to Mechabellum. In today's game I want to show you guys how patience is key sometimes in trying to close out a game. And you can see that we are facing King Bungie, also known as AFK Woot, a German streamer, very strong player, likes to play aggro pretty much exclusively and is known for his usage of overlords. He's one of the best, so if you like the type of playstyle, definitely do check him out. He's going to go for Giant Specialist here with Steel Ball Crawler as a start, and I decide to go for Tarantulas because I think it is the strongest pack out of the ones that were offered. I am a Marksman Specialist, so round 2 I'll get access to that Marksman. Again, I know this player and I know that they like using boats, so having that level 3 Marksman on the board will definitely help me and, well, prevent some unpleasant surprises, I guess. Now, a peculiar thing about my opponent is that he almost exclusively plays on the right side of the board, and he always plays asymmetrically. So here's a little bit of like knowledge from the high Mamars where, well, I faced this player so much and other players have too, we know this, but he's still able to win the majority of his games. So, you know, don't let this fool you. Even with this knowledge, he manages to get more wins than losses. I decided to go for a bit of a mid setup here. I do know that he is playing more on the... He's going to be playing on the right side, but I didn't really fancy a straight-up headbutt. Instead, I do want to contest the line, but I'd like to go wide here because the thing about his playstyle is that he really likes to go and use both sides of the board. So even though he starts on the right side, he will eventually go onto the left. And in my experience, especially against the boats, abandoning the tower is actually quite tough and will often end up in you losing both towers, and then you lose the one that is not leveled up, and yeah, it's just a horror. So I kind of want to make sure that I am able to go wide on the board and protect both of my towers, which is why I go for a central pool here. Now my opponent does win out, goes for double Arclight here on round 1, and the steel balls have no problems locking onto my Tarantulas. But that's completely fine. That's kind of how round 1 usually goes. I don't have the DPS here. Only the Tarantulas are there, and the steel balls are just a little bit too tanky to deal with. But we get our DPS this turn. We get that Marksman. And we have a choice here of Rhino Assault, Intensive Training, Fortified Overlord. Mobile Beacon is not really something I'm considering. I'm the one that's defending here. So, yeah, I don't see the use case for Mobile Beacon. And I have to think about this Rhino Assault, which is a bit of a menace. And so with the Rhino Assault, I'm thinking here, okay, what do I want to do with my resources? I can try and like Rhino Assault, but honestly, my backline is more vulnerable than his for the moment, or at least, well, the left side, he levels the tower, the crawlers are already there, so I'll probably get stuck a little bit, and yeah, this, if he does something like this, I will have to protect it. So the question is, do I really want to go for Rhino Assault myself? Opponent already picked it up, but I also have to think about what exactly is my round going to be. And I was a little bit afraid of the other things that my opponent could do, right? The flanks are wide open. He can attack from a multitude of different angles. He could purchase some wasps, perhaps. I don't really have good anti-air. And so here what I decide to do is skip, because it allows me to get 450 resources and buy 2 wasps to defend the flanks. Now, that does mean that I'm not really in the middle, which is why you see me move this wasp more so to the back. But my opponent puts down a crawler exactly on that side, so yeah, a little bit unfortunate there. The Rhino almost gets pulled towards the crawlers, but there is one stray crawler which pulls it into my tower, so I will get debuffed here, sadly. However, my opponent does not have anti-air. So because he really tried to make sure that this Rhino would go through, he did not have the money to be able to afford some anti-air here. Did not go for the wasp play, which was a possibility on his side as well, something I was trying to preempt. But because he doesn't do that, I can just win the round, even though I did get cheesed, right? My opponent invested quite a few resources into this active, invested into the flank, but it's to no avail, and I managed to save myself some much needed hit points and get a win on the board. Quite important, by the way, because I was dipping below 4k already. And the nice thing as well is that I at least get 1 leveled up wasp here, so he can't really contest with his own wasps anymore, because I will be ahead in that sense. Round 3, we get unit reinforcements. And here, I mean, Sandworm doesn't look too appealing, not into the Steel Balls and the other units. Stormcaller is worth the most, so if I just want to sell, that's fine. Or at least, well, the direct sell is worth the most. But not great into the Steel Balls and the Crawlers, hard to hit, plus I was kind of expecting the Overlord. And so what I decided to pick here instead is the Sabers. One, I get 3 deployments, it's worth the most in total amount of resources, and it allows me to go wide on the board yet again and kind of utilize all my deployments to make sure that there are no weak points on my board to abuse from my opponent. They're also quite good into these Steel Balls. Both of them level up. My opponent does decide to level them up, so I needed some single target DPS. I already have that level 3 marksman, so I'm just working with what I have, knowing that that's going to be enough against potential Overlord, which does show up. I decided to put a Sabertooth in the back there, hoping for a debuff, but my opponent added 2 Crawlers. Still, it allows me to delay some of these Crawlers and lock on to the important targets, so the Steel Balls will already be gone. My Marksman should lock on to that Overlord soon as we try and dispatch of the final Steel Ball. Well, it looks like the Crawlers arrived just in time, but I mean, look at how much stuff is left alive. That flank that he added, those Crawlers dealt with easily. There's still a pack of Wasps over there. The blue Wasps are distracting nicely. Overlord is leveling up, but you can see that my opponent does not run carry techs. Instead is running the jump drive, chin gun, mothership, and photon coating build. And so yeah, he's really about running into the tower and moving around his units where possible. Round 4, efficient giant manufacturing shows up. It picked up on my opponent. Makes sense, he's a giant spec, already has the Overlords, so why not? I decide to skip. Nothing there really of value. I'm kind of into small units here. I wouldn't know what giants I'd like to buy. I run the same techs, so no point in mirroring a giant specialist. So I decided to just keep the resources to myself. Instead, I buy another Tarantula. I click double shot on the Sabers to make sure that we get rid of any ground units. Add a Crawler there to the right side, a Tarantula as well, because I was afraid of like some sort of chaff pull here. I don't have good chaff here on the right side, so that's why I add this. The high explosive should help us clear the ground much more efficiently, and that will allow our important units to lock on. You can see here that I'm deciding not to go deeper into the anti-air, not too much. I add 1 more marksman because I want to see what my opponent is going to do. He still has this Wasp problem to deal with, right? Nothing on his board at these last round was able to deal with it. And I kind of want to see where he's going. If I have to already, if I already tech into like AA on my Wasps or my Marksman, then I show my hand and he might go into a different type of giant and get a lot of tempo from that. So it's a bit of a cat and mouse game, and I don't want to be the first one to yield, and I currently don't think I'm in a position where I need to make a proactive play. Last round went fantastic. And so yeah, my opponent adds another boat to try and deal with the Saber, but we sell out of that. And you can see that this is all going swimmingly. My opponent deciding to add a fortress. And so yeah, that's kind of where what I was afraid of, right? I knew that there was a possibility of him going fortress. He can unlock it for free. He's that giant spec. And fortress AA would be very strong against Wasp. So I don't want to overcommit into their techs and make it a really valuable pickup for him. Round 5. We get some big red spells, but it's maybe a little bit too early to pick. For me, it's not that good. Lots of big units there that wouldn't die to it, so I'm not going to go for that. Instead, both of us pick up the deployment module. The reason for doing that on my end was being able to move around the board a bit more, potentially match the shenanigans from his side, and also be able to make proactive plays onto this tower. So the idea here was to go for the empty tower, put a Crawler on the flank, pull these Crawlers away, and make sure that the double shot Saber takes down that fortified tower. However, my opponent had the same idea, didn't get much success on the right side, so instead moves the fortress to the left, adds 2 new Overlords, clicks ground Overlord artillery, excuse me, on his Overlords as well, and adds another Crawler to the flank for even more annoyance. Missile has been added too, so yeah, this Sabertooth is not long for the world. There's not much chaff over there. Crawler gets added into the shallow flank instead. I do have the Wasps, which I moved, and I decide to click AA on my Marksman now because my opponent had both Fortress and 2 Overlords, and so I was like, even if he wants to sell out of Overlord, it's going to cost him way too many turns to get out of it. So I think it's worth just clicking the tech. And my opponent does go further into both. And so this should pay off in the long run. I'm a bit surprised, obviously, to see this commitment onto the left. But that was what I was trying to play around on round 1. Making sure that I don't have to deal with a fully empty left side on my end, where he would be able to abuse, right, that weakness on my board. Left side not doing too great. Some of my crawlers somehow managing to get through, though. But yeah, that is a leveled tower, and that Overlord artillery, ever since the changes, or the nerfs, however you want to see it, does have more range. Now with 140 range, able to snipe those crawlers. My team did manage to get into the right tower, but we weren't able to do too much with it because we were so far away from the action. But with no chaff remaining, you have to imagine that this will be good. I mean, look at that chin gun, though. Shooting at the marksman, and we were just about able to take down the Overlord before my marksman dies. This does send down our opponent to 766 hit points. So right now, he seems to be within striking distance, and I might be able to close out the game here. We get Lightning Storm again. A bit too expensive for my taste. Again, lots of giants on the board. I wouldn't be able to kill them with this spell, so I'm not willing to spend the 450. Instead, I go for the cheaper spell, going for that electromagnetic impact and throwing it onto the left. My idea here was that he probably would not go jump drive just yet, and so I'm willing to kind of risk it. It's a cheap spell. If it hits, it should be very good. Opponent, though, goes for the expensive spell with the Lightning Storm. And because of the oil that was expended last turn, I was kind of expecting some sort of fire. Maybe my opponent wants to unlock and buy a Vulcan, which you could do for free. But yeah, instead it's going to be a storm hitting me on the right side. So this will kill most of my chaff and probably kill the marksman as well. I did play around this somewhat by trying to beacon these guys away and into the action. The 2 Rhino drops are available as well. Just the one, sorry. I didn't pick it up. Opponent here using it on the left. Adding another boat there to the left side. So this will be hitting. I'm expending some missiles here. I'm loaning, obviously. Because I'm trying to close things out. Another spider, some crawlers here to defend my saber. And I decide to click aerial specialization onto my wasp. But I was kind of expecting some sort of additional deployments onto the left, which I'm correct in. So here we are managing to EMP the Overlords, make sure that they don't have that chin gun available. Sadly, my Tarantula there going down, and the Saber also gets killed relatively fast. The Marksman got slowed by the looks of it because of the storm, and so it's taking a real long time for it to arrive on time. The Wasps seem to just be slightly too far within range of the Overlords with just the aerial specialization, and it looks like I might need range enhancement as well. There's one Overlord left on the right. Again, that marksman, right, died to the storm, and so it's unable to deal with this. And now we're getting flanked from 2 sides. Towers are falling, marksman going down, Sabertooth left to its own devices. Can we kill that remaining fortress? It doesn't even look like that will be the case. A couple wasps left alive, but that might be asking too much. And so 2 giants there live on a turn that I was trying to close things out. Not a great sign. And we get unit reinforcements on top of things. Nothing here looks that good for me, if I have to be completely honest. Stormcaller and Vulcan are worth the most, at least like in terms of easiness to sell. Sledgehammer as well. So it's probably going to be one of those 2. And then, well, sell out of them across the next 2 turns. Vulcan would make the most sense to me. And that is what I'm going to go for. I get the giant unlock. So, you know, that's an extra 200 at least. And chaff clear can never go wrong. I am kind of lacking it across the board. And so that'll be my unit of choice. I sell one and I use the other one to be able to chaff clear on the left side. Opponent goes for Typhoons, relatively logical choice, and decides to go barrier right away. For those of you that know, Taiba or Typhoon both has been a very strong composition, so it's a logical addition to his board. Decides to move and level up the fortress. This is going to be a very sad Sabertooth. And I was kind of expecting maybe some more fortresses with anti-air, so that's why I go for the War Factory with missile interception. Should also help somewhat against the Overlords. Of course, I can't intercept the Overlord artillery, but if I can intercept some missiles here from potential anti-air barrage and otherwise just the missiles from the Overlord attacks, then I think that's good enough. It's also a large pool of hit points, 170k, not that easy to get through. But yeah, crucially here, I do make one mistake, and that is I don't add another marksman onto the left side, which is definitely something that I should have done. Opponent abandons right side completely now, going fully for the right side. And even though that fortress was leveled, the War Factory, very good at DPSing these ground units, exceptionally good as well against the Typhoons. So I'm pretty happy with my pick, even though my opponent didn't go for the anti-air. And yeah, sadly, my War Factory will eventually go down, and here you can see the lack of anti-air costing me. If I had a marksman there DPSing, I would be completely fine, but sadly I don't, and that means that these Overlords are getting in and will get tower. We're now kind of split in an awkward manner, where both of our units are trying to get to the tower, but I foresee something really bad for me here. Tower will fall, 9 seconds of debuff, and the marksmen, because of their extra range, or their long range, are sitting on the inside of my army, and so they get targeted first, which means that the Overlords will be completely safe to kill the rest of my army, so I lose round 7 as well. An opponent is starting to make a bit of a comeback, so I'm thinking, well, this isn't looking too great. How am I going to end this? Round 8, efficient giant manufacturing shows up again, but it's not worth for me. I don't plan to buy more giants. At least not 3 more, which is what it would take to at least break even when picking this card. And so yeah, I just decided to skip. I need my money. I also did spend 200 there on the upkeep of the War Factory, and of course I lost 100 because I went for the loan. Opponent here though, opting to go for the jump drive after all. Moving all of the boats onto the right side, does have a deployment module for that fortress, which is going to join the army on the right. And so here I'm thinking, well, considering that my opponent is within striking distance, I have to think about defending my right side, obviously, because of the jump drive, and I have to think about how am I going to take down the Overlords, but also how am I going to deal with something like Mothership. I have 2 options then. It's going to be either Mustang or Wasp. I'm already into Wasp. I was a bit afraid of taking them early on, because it could get punished quite easily by things like anti-air barrage, and my opponent could still deviate from the boats. But now, I can kill him within 1 turn, and he is well and truly invested into the boats, so it's time to invest into the Wasps. The Wasps are excellent into air units. If you get both of these techs, they don't lose to anything, and so I decided to get the range, the anti-air, 3 more Wasp packs, 2 on the right side to make sure that I don't lose to something like this, and we press play. How is this going to go? And my opponent here, right, the idea is that I'm going to win this round because I click range and AA, and then my opponent won't have the time to get something like anti-air barrage, which would heavily counter my response. And even though the strongest part of my army is on the left, the right side holding valiantly, I think crucially my opponent doesn't have that great shaft clear, right? The Typhoons were all left on the left side and could not be moved to the right side. And so that's buying us some time. The range and AA Wasps are fantastic against the Wasp spawn, something which more anti-air marksmen would not have been able to deal with. And they're also great chaff and great DPS against the Overlords. And so that's how we close out the game. This was, I think, a good example of a defensive game where you utilize what you know about your opponent. Obviously, in high MMR, we'll have a little bit more knowledge of each other's playstyles because we often play against the same players. So I use that to my advantage. I think, okay, I'm up against steel balls. I know it's going to be aggressive. I kind of want to make sure that I can defend both sides, so I go for a bit of a mid pull. And then after that, we just play to our strengths. I know I'm a marksman spec. I can see that the Overlords were offered. So, you know, this marksman is going to be my DPS early. And I'm also not going to overcommit too much into anti-air because my opponent in the early game will still have options. Could try and pivot into fortress. I don't want to give him you know, an easy button to click by already overcommitting into something like range and AA wasps when I'll need to win the next 3 to 4 rounds to win the game. And so we just play things a bit slowly. We add the wasps. They're a nuisance. We need to see a response from him. And then we just play accordingly, right? My right side is strong. I just keep it as is. My opponent decides to play on the left side. We respond by adding the deployments on the left. And then we try and make some plays. It wasn't as clean as it could have been. I should have added the marksman there and probably been able to close things out a bit earlier. But we play around, yeah, what the state of the game is. And eventually we recognize, okay, now my opponent is within 1 round of dying, which means that I can make a play which would otherwise get heavily countered if my opponent had 2 turns, but I'm going to play for the situation where he won't have another turn. And so that's why we go for the gut shot play here. We say Wasp with range AA is vulnerable to anti-air barrage, yes, but if you can't buy that, if you don't have that extra turn, it's going to destroy everything in the air, and you're very heavily air-based. And so that will win us the game in the end. Either way, if you like this video, please leave a thumbs up. If you want to stay up to date with my latest content, please consider subscribing. Want to see me play live? Check me out on Twitch. And with that being said, take care, guys, and see you in the next video. Bye-bye.